Imagine this, more than 10,000 armed Americans marching through the mountains with rifles on their shoulders, machine guns waiting on the ridges, airplanes dropping homemade bombs from the sky. It sounds like a scene from a civil war, but this wasn't a battle against a foreign nation. It happened inside the United States. In 1921, ordinary coal miners launched what would become the largest armed labor uprising in American history since the Civil War. This is the incredible story of the Battle of Blair Mountain. In the early 20th century, America was growing faster than ever before. Railroads stretched across the continent. Steel mills roared day and night. Factories filled the cities with smoke. Behind all of that progress was one resource that powered the nation: coal. Deep beneath the mountains of West Virginia, thousands of miners spent their lives digging out the fuel that kept America moving. But while the country became richer, the miners remained trapped in poverty. Most mining companies owned entire towns. They built the houses where miners lived. They owned the stores where families bought food. They even controlled schools and churches. Many workers weren't paid in U.S. dollars. Instead, they received company scrip, money that could only be spent at company-owned stores where prices were often much higher than normal. It was a system that kept families permanently in debt. Working underground was even worse. Every day miners entered dark tunnels filled with explosive gas, collapsing rock, and thick coal dust. A single mistake could kill dozens of men. Many never returned home. Others survived only to develop black lung disease after years of breathing coal dust. Despite these dangers, wages remained extremely low. When workers demanded safer conditions or better pay, many were immediately fired. If they lost their jobs, they also lost their homes because the company owned them too. For thousands of families, there seemed to be no escape. Finally, miners began joining the United Mine Workers of America. The union promised fair wages, shorter working hours, safer mines, and respect for workers. The coal companies saw the union as a direct threat. Instead of negotiating, they hired armed private detectives from the feared Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. These agents became famous for using intimidation and violence. They broke strikes. They forced families out of company houses. They arrested union organizers. Sometimes they even opened fire. The conflict continued to grow until it exploded in the small mining town of Matewan. In May 1920, Baldwin Felts detectives arrived to evict union miners. Standing against them was the town's police chief, Sid Hatfield. Hatfield refused to allow the detectives to remove the families. Within minutes, gunfire erupted in the streets. When the shooting stopped, several Baldwin Felts agents lay dead. The incident became known as the Matewan Massacre. Across the coalfields, miners celebrated Sid Hatfield as a hero, but powerful coal operators wanted revenge. 1 year later, on August 1, 1921, Hatfield arrived at the courthouse in Welch. Before he could enter the building, gunmen connected to the Baldwin Felts agency opened fire. Sid Hatfield was killed in broad daylight. His wife watched helplessly. No one was convicted for the murder. For thousands of miners, that was the final breaking point. If the courts refused to deliver justice, they believed they would have to fight for it themselves. Word spread through mining camps across southern West Virginia. Men left their homes carrying hunting rifles, military surplus weapons from World War I, and whatever ammunition they could find. Many tied red bandanas around their necks so they could recognize one another during battle. Historians believe this is one of the origins of the nickname redneck. Within days, nearly 10,000 armed miners gathered. Their mission was simple: march into the non-union coalfields, free imprisoned union supporters, and force the mining companies to recognize workers' rights. But standing between them and their destination was one obstacle: a steep mountain ridge known as Blair Mountain. Waiting, there was an army organized by local sheriff Don Chaffin. Coal companies supplied Chaffin's forces with rifles, machine guns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Defenders dug trenches across the mountainsides. Snipers hid among the trees. Machine gun nests overlooked every trail. Neither side planned to surrender. America was about to witness one of the largest armed confrontations in its modern history. At the end of August 1921, the miners reached the slopes of Blair Mountain. On one side stood nearly 10,000 armed miners. On the other side were around 3,000 defenders, led by Don Chaffin. Although they were outnumbered, they held the advantage. They controlled the high ground and were equipped with machine guns, trenches, and support from powerful coal companies. As the first shots rang out, the mountains echoed with gunfire. For 5 days, miners fought their way through thick forests and steep hillsides. Veterans of World War I used military tactics they had learned overseas. They advanced from tree to tree, using the rugged terrain as cover while exchanging fire with Chaffin's men. The battle quickly became one of the largest armed conflicts ever fought on American soil after the American Civil War. Then the fighting took an even more shocking turn. Coal operators hired private pilots to fly over the battlefield. From the air, they dropped homemade bombs, some filled with explosives and others with tear gas, onto the miners below. It was one of the very few times in U.S. history that aircraft were used against American civilians during during a labor conflict. The bombs caused fear and confusion, but they failed to stop the miners. The fighting continued day and night. Bullets cut through the trees, smoke covered the mountains. Food and ammunition became scarce on both sides. Many miners believed victory was finally within reach, but events hundreds of miles away in Washington would change everything. President Warren G. Harding decided the conflict had gone too far. He ordered thousands of federal troops into West Virginia. The U.S. Army arrived with experienced soldiers, heavy weapons, and military aircraft. For many miners, this created a painful choice. They were willing to fight coal companies. They were willing to fight private detectives, but they were not willing to wage war against the United States Army. Many had served under the American flag. During World War I, they refused to fire on federal soldiers. One by one, miners lowered their rifles. Some buried their weapons in the mountains before returning home. Others simply walked away. By early September 1921, the Battle of Blair Mountain was over. The official death toll is uncertain. Most historians estimate that at least 16 to 30 people were killed, though some believe the true number was higher because many casualties were never officially recorded. After the battle, authorities arrested hundreds of miners. Some were charged with murder. Others faced accusations of treason against the state of West Virginia. Long and expensive trials followed. Although many miners were eventually acquitted or received lighter sentences, the labor movement suffered a devastating setback. Membership in the United Mine Workers of America fell dramatically over the following years. For a time, it seemed the coal companies had won, but history had one more surprise. The courage shown by the miners was never forgotten. During the 1930s, as the United States struggled through the Great Depression, public attitudes toward workers began to change. New labor laws gave unions stronger legal protections, and many of the rights the Blair Mountain miners had fought, better wages, safer workplaces, and the right to organize, gradually became recognized across the country. Today, the Battle of Blair Mountain is remembered as far more than a gunfight in the mountains. It became a symbol of the struggle between ordinary workers and powerful corporations. It showed how desperate people can become when they believe justice has been denied. For decades, this extraordinary chapter of American history remained largely forgotten. Yet the mountains of West Virginia still hold the scars of that conflict. Hidden beneath the trees are old trenches, spent bullets, and silent reminders of a time when thousands of American workers marched into battle, believing they were fighting for dignity, fairness, and a better future. The Battle of Blair Mountain wasn't just America's biggest labor war. It was a turning point that helped shape the future of workers' rights in the United States.